Fibromyalgia is a chronic disorder characterized by widespread musculoskeletal pain, fatigue, and tenderness in localized areas. Symptoms often include sleep disturbances, cognitive difficulties, and heightened sensitivity to stimuli. The prevalence rate of this condition is about 2 to 3% of the population. Idiopathic intracranial hypertension involves increased pressure in the skull without a detectable cause. This elevated intracranial pressure can lead to headaches, visual disturbances, and if untreated, may result in vision loss. The exact cause remains unknown, and it is often observed in young women who are overweight and has an incidence rate of about 7.8 per 100,000 people per year. And complex post-traumatic stress disorder arises from prolonged or repeated exposure to traumatic events such as chronic abuse or captivity. It extends beyond the symptoms of PTSD, encompassing emotional dysregulation, negative self-perception, and difficulties in interpersonal relationships. Individuals may experience persistent feelings of helplessness, shame, and a sense of being different from others. While specific prevalence rates for CPTSD are not well established, studies suggest that approximately one-third of patients with fibromyalgia meet the criteria for PTSD. And what do these three conditions have in common? Welcome to Chronic Life Success, where we explore the triumphs and struggles of living with chronic illness. Today, I am thrilled to have Jessie, a 34-year-old entrepreneur and designer from England, joining us. Jessie lives with multiple chronic conditions, including ADHD, fibromyalgia, idiopathic intracranial hypertension, and complex PTSD. Despite the challenges these bring, she has crafted a life with creativity, purpose, and what she calls glimmers, small joys that bring light to her day. Let us welcome Jessie, and welcome to the show. Hi, Jessie. How are you doing today?
I'm really good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for joining me on Chronic Life Success. I really greatly appreciate the time that you're giving us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. So we're just going to get restarted. And could you share a little bit about your journey and what led you to become an entrepreneur, a designer, and how living with chronic illnesses has influenced that?
I actually had a background working in security and within the NHS here in the UK before becoming ill. I was diagnosed with idiopathic intracranial hypertension back in 2017, and I was assessed by occupational health and they deemed me as not being suitable for solo working anymore. That's not ideal when you're working in security and you're doing 12 to 14 hour night shifts. My heart sank because it was a job that I loved at the time, and I kind of knew in my heart of hearts that I had to take some time out and focus on recovery and finding my new normal. It was a new set of challenges and I didn't want to accept that it was happening to me at the time. Got pretty frustrated with it. I have always been a creative person. I've always had that little tiny spark inside me. I loved art at school and I've always held that. And during the time that I was diagnosed, and I was probably in a pretty dark place actually, because everything in my life that I knew had just sort of changed drastically. I found myself watching an unhealthy amount of YouTube, let's just say, creators on YouTube, and I felt inspired by them every single day. They kind of reminded me of my creative abilities and what I could do, but obviously that might be a bit different now, having been diagnosed with something quite major, and my symptoms being up and down and all over the place. I remember going on Amazon and thinking, I'm going to make an order for some craft supplies, some art supplies to help ease me back into my hobbies. And I remember my first watercolour painting that I did post, being ill. And it was interesting, let's just say that, because I had all this creativity held inside me for so long. And it was a way for me to spend time with myself, if that makes sense, through it. And I just remember creating this painting inspired by the architecture at the University of East Anglia. Their buildings are really, really cool. And I kind of looked at it and I was like, these lines are really wonky. It was very different to how I had been able to do art previously. Let's just say that. due to pain and vision and things like that. It was all very different. And it was very hard for me not to beat myself up about that because, previously I'd been able to do this. But I thought art is my true passion, it's my thing. I want to try and continue doing it, so I'm going to have to work through it, think a bit differently, and be a bit more patient with myself.
Yeah. That you bring up a good point. Sitting watching a ton of YouTube after you've been sick or you've gotten sick and finding out more about your illness. I can relate to that very well. When I first came out of the hospital, that
Yeah.
whole first year, I spent a ton of time watching YouTube. And you brought up a really good point because it really helped inspire me to take on actually a new hobby and now two new hobbies. And so we've had discussions prior about the first hobby, and that's leatherworking, and totally inspired by watching hours upon hours of leather crafters on YouTube, but has also been really awesome I think in my journey as well. And then now this is my second hobby that I've taken up is watching hours and hours of YouTube on to how to create a community like this. So you bring up a really good point of it would be really interesting if whoever's watching, I'm just going to throw this out to the audience. If YouTube is something that you've used as a crutch while recovering from illness or during your illness journey, please let us know. Have
Yeah, let
drop a
us know. We want to
comment.
know.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to hear from everybody if you haven't been directly affected by chronic illness, but you are looking after somebody who is, also leave a comment because that's really good information and we can use that for future episodes as well.
YouTube is very powerful for us people who suffer chronic illness because actually when you're limited in what you can do maybe and you're spending a lot of time at home, it's kind of a little window into the outside world and connection with other people, and that's really really important.
Yeah, I think so. I think social media is really important for people with chronic illness. Despite all of its problems as a whole, I do think for the demographic of us with chronic illness, social media is really important because we can't always get out into the world. And so it's really an opportunity to at least have that window into the world and have that ability to communicate with other
Yeah,
people.
that's exactly it. It's a bit of escapism sometimes. And
So you got this diagnosis and it significantly kind of changed your outlook on life. And so what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you first started living your life again after the diagnosis, and how did you overcome them?
I think the biggest challenge for me was giving myself permission to rest whenever I can. I know that sounds really basic, but actually it's the most important to me. Pacing myself. Haha, laughing in ADHD to myself over that. Yeah, just being patient with yourself. And I was a perfectionist pre-illness. I would have to have everything done to a certain standard, and I needed to try and squash my perfectionism down a little bit and be a bit more forgiving with myself. And things were very very different for me. From what I'd known, everything I'd known was just suddenly changed. And also, one of the biggest challenges was realizing that most normal, in quotes, workplaces were not flexible enough for people with chronic illnesses. And that was a massive challenge.
Yeah, I think that is a huge challenge. For as much as our culture says that, they're very accommodating to people with needs or accommodations, I think a lot of businesses are really afraid of people with or really afraid of having employees with chronic illnesses and being willing to give them that flexibility to work with inside that illness as well. Yeah. I just want to go back to something else that you said is that you've always really been a creative person and it's played a big role in your life. I guess can you expand a little bit more on that and how you navigate the difficulties of your chronic illness and apply it to your art and creativity?
Yeah, so it's always been something that I've enjoyed. As I say, I've always had that creative. I'm much more of a creative person. Like, you asked me to do math, and math is not mathing. It's something that I enjoy and brings me happiness anyway. So, of course, I was going to naturally navigate towards that, going through my toughest times. Doing it for a living is amazing. Like, I am very privileged and incredibly lucky to be able to do this for a living. I'm currently a designer and strategist for a freelancing agency, and the work I do is so varied and I get to do so many cool things. And yeah, just it's just so lovely to be able to do that every single day. And I don't ever take it for granted. I mean, if I go periods of time without being creative, like sometimes I've been in a bit of a rut where I won't do anything for a few weeks and then my brain hurts and I don't feel like myself. And then I'm thinking to myself, what's the problem here? I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. You bring up a good point. What I found with me, especially with like the leather work and why I got into it is after that first year of pretty much just sitting at a computer and doing the exercises of the therapies and such, I needed to do something that not only would engage my mind, but it definitely would engage my hands as well and
Yes,
allow that creativity to pour out. Because I think, yeah, you get really trapped in those thoughts, and the longer you stay there without allowing creativity to pour out, I think that it really starts to get a lot darker
it does.
overall and such. And it's really important to find that adaptability. And so that just allows us to make some adjustments in our lives. And it sounds like you were able to pivot quite well and utilize adaptability to go from security into the creative workspace of being a strategist.
Yeah, I mean there was a long period of time that I wasn't doing any work, and like you say, it's really important to have just something that you can focus your mind on and keep yourself not distracted, I would say, but like keep yourself a bit busy. It certainly helps.
Yeah. Have you adapted any other strategies to work with your body and still be connected to your creative goals?
Yes, as I say, resting is huge. Also, escaping everyday life, going, when I have enough spoons to go out and do something, go out and do something that I think is going to ignite a little bit of inspiration within me to do more creative things. So, for example, like a couple of weeks ago, I went into London with my friend Daisy and we went to a Tim Burton exhibition and it was amazing.
I imagine.
It was so, so good. And like just a little day out like that, I just feel so inspired. And you can draw inspiration from anything and everything. So for me, it's just, I'm an introvert, right? But forcing myself out of my comfort zone into the real world for a bit to get inspired is definitely what helps for me.
Yeah. I myself tend to be a little bit more extroverted, and I actually like getting out into public. And I have to say, one of the most difficult things I've experienced about my situation is just the inability to get out and enjoy the things outside of the four walls here. And so I'm just going to link that back to our previous comments about YouTube and social media. That's actually that's been huge, and we actually had the opportunity to meet on social media. And so what I appreciate about that, it's given us an opportunity to chat multiple times and bring us to this culmination point as well. So yeah, for all its failures, social media definitely does play a big role for us, I think,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
a
for
whole.
sure. Like there's a whole community of like-minded people. And, when you're diagnosed with a chronic health condition, nobody hands you a leaflet and goes, this is how your life is going to change in this many ways, and this is how you're going to cope with it. And, finding other people who have gone through what you've gone through or are going through a similar journey or face the same kind of struggles as you is amazing because you can build up a whole online community.
Yeah, that's actually the inspiration for this podcast as well. And, for people who have chronic illnesses such as yourself, people who've been through traumas and are left with chronic conditions such as me, and just anybody else. I recently interviewed a wonderful woman who battled two cancer diagnoses within a period of 39 days. And so the one thing that seems to be a common theme with so far everybody I've talked to, and even my own experience, is just that lack of knowledge of what do you do with yourself after the doctor's appointments are kind of winding down, after the therapies are starting to wind down. We get instructions on the doctor's appointment, the medications, the therapies, but what seems to really be lacking is how do you live life with these new conditions, and how do you make those changes and adaptations to continue to be successful. And it seems that in your case, you've definitely found a stream of success despite your conditions and diagnoses.
What I will say was it was a lot of trial and error. As I say, I also have ADHD, so part of being creative is having a new hobby every week and then deciding
Right.
that you want a new one the following week. So yeah, that was a lot of trial and error and a lot of financial investment. Sorry, everyone. um,
One of the good things about that, though, is I think it gives you an opportunity to try a lot of different things to find out what you really like. And I'm sure then once you really do find something you like, you're able to put a little bit more focus into it.
yeah, and also you can practice it and get better at it in your own pace. There's no one sitting down who's next to you who's going, "Hey, that's not good enough. You need to try harder. Use your hands
Right.
better." You know.
Exactly. Um, so in talking to you earlier and getting your bio together, you've coined the term glimmers to describe your moments of joy during the day. Can you go into that a little bit more and describe what you mean by glimmers?
Yeah, of course. So glimmers to me are tiny little flecks of joy, sparks of magic in every single day. They became in focus in my life when I was struggling the most with my health. Despite everything, I had that kind of spark of hope that, you know, not that I would recover fully and my life would be the same as before, but accepting a new normal and then accepting that things would be different and there'd be new challenges, but they could still be very good and very positive and very magical. I remember when I was in my deepest, darkest place, like one of my ADHD hyperfixations was Disneyland Paris. And I remember thinking, like, I really want to be well enough to go and enjoy it and, start planning a trip and things like that. It soon became like once I made that first trip, I realised like leaving your worries at those gates for 3 days, going in, eating all the snacks, riding all the rides, and just realising that that is something that brings me a huge amount of joy. Those to me were sort of my glimmers. But even before then, before like, planning a big trip, it was something as simple as that first sip of coffee really hit my soul today, or the weather is, cold and crisp outside, which I love, and just being really thankful for those small moments. And it could be, having a video call with a friend for a few hours and just being appreciative for what you have. And yes, things are tough, and yes, things are very different, but finding those small pockets of joy, as I call them, glimmers, in every day, you soon realize, like when you actually take note of them, wow, like, yeah, there is still so much beauty going on here despite everything I'm going through.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, and I am kind of curious with your planning of the trip. I imagine just the planning alone probably instilled a whole lot of anxiety.
So I had to take a step back and find as much advice as I could from the online community. Luckily, there are, groups on Facebook that exist for these purposes now of, chatting with other people who have been with this health condition or that health condition, or they face these problems and issues, and they support and communicate adaptations you can make to your trip to make it easier for you, or if you've got particular things that are bothering and worrying you, like actually reaching out to the organisation and saying, look, I'm terrified about this happening. They can reassure you with the things that they have set in place.
It's awesome that you said that because I've had to look back at this in hindsight, but one of the things that when I look back at some of the vacations I've taken, the hospitality industry is really one of the few industries that I think has really embraced the difficulties that people may be experiencing and has been so accommodating. And I really realize there's like profit drivers and all of that because they're a business. They want to make sure they can cast a broad net. But nonetheless, experiences that I've had. I went on a cruise with my mom and my grandmother years ago, and this was when I was first in nursing school. And of course, one of the things that interested me was where's the med bay? And so I went down there and I had a chance to chat with the doctor and the nurses that were on staff there. And we just had a brief conversation about, what they offer and how accommodating they are to people with any kind of chronic illnesses, diabetes management, heart medication management, and just like how fast they could react. And that, of course, just all really intrigued me. And then I also learned about dialysis cruise ships. And so, cruise ships designed around taking patients with kidney failure so that they can have dialysis and still live life and have this amazing experience.
Wow, I did not know that was a.
Yeah, yeah. There's not a whole lot of them, but they do exist. And yeah, it was really inspiring. And, like I say, I wasn't sick at that time. So I look at all of this in hindsight.
Yeah,
But yeah, it does really seem to be that the hospitality industry, it does definitely embrace that compared to a lot of other industries.
for sure.
So yeah. So how do you intentionally create space in your life so that you can notice and appreciate these glimmers on a day-to-day basis?
I try to get out of my own way. Like, if I'm caught up in work or chores or, everyday life, it can be overwhelming sometimes to think, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. But actually prioritizing and carving out that time for yourself is integral. It is so important to me. Like, I would not be able to function without having time for myself and time to express myself.
Did it take you a long time to give yourself that permission structure to
Yeah.
be able to do that?
Yeah. I felt like, to begin with, I felt, oh, I'm wasting my time, trying to do this painting because it's going to look rubbish. And, those kind of thoughts enter your mind as you're going along. But actually, the more you kind of get out of your own way and, actually go, it's worth me doing this. Like, it might not feel that way at first. It's certainly a journey. Like, you're not going to
Yeah.
sit down and do what you did before and it immediately be the same. It's just patience with yourself, giving yourself permission and making sure you take that time. And also have others support you in taking that time. That is a massive thing. If you've got someone sitting in your corner going, "Hey, I think you should like go and do your thing for an hour." Just, little reminders from them always helps as well.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right in that. It is important to have that encouragement, and someone to help reinforce what you're already telling yourself as well. I know talking to Tracy Fossum, that was a previous interview where she's been dealing with chronic pain for a long time. And that was one of the difficult things for her was to give herself that permission to do something fun despite the chores not being done. A dirty dish will still be there tomorrow. You may have
Exactly,
two dirty
exactly.
dishes to deal with, but it
I
will still be there
remember,
tomorrow.
I remember when I was first picking up my art tools and the kitchen was like this high stacked with washing up. And do you know what? It was still there the next day and nothing bad happened. Everything was fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that giving yourself that permission is really important and to realize that, yeah, if a chore doesn't get done, it can be done tomorrow and yeah, on those, especially on those really difficult days. And so do you have any tips for somebody who's just been diagnosed, just come out of a hospital, taking on a new life challenge of chronic illness and whatever form that may take for them? Do you have any tips that you would like the listeners to know on how to find their own glimmers, even on the darkest of days?
Yes. So first of all, I would advise them to throw everything that they know about productivity and things like that out of the window because things are going to be different. They'll be challenging. There'll be a different way of living and there'll be sort of an adjustment phase. But really kind of tuning into yourself is the way I found helped. So just being more present. A lot of people say, meditation is great for people with chronic illness and I agree, but I would say that being present in the moment rather than trying to escape it sometimes is really powerful because you are going to notice the beautiful pink sunset, you are going to notice the stars out at night, you are going to notice the friend who phoned you for 5 minutes just to check in with you that you're okay. And as long as you have that spark of hope inside you, that's what's going to get you through. Doctors will probably give you a leaflet about your condition, a follow-up appointments and medication, and then you're left to your own devices. Nobody's going to kind of sit you down and go, hey, this is what's going to happen. These are the changes you can make immediately. You're going to be back to your normal self. But yeah, slowing down, taking each day as it comes, trying not to get ahead of yourself by planning in X, Y, Z, in your schedule. Yeah, just looking out for those moments that might seem very normal to a lot of people, but when you have chronic illness and you're in quite a dark place, it is that first sip of coffee, a rainbow in the sky, just all those kinds of things.
Yeah. For those of our listeners that are joining us and maybe don't have chronic illness but have friends or family with chronic illness, Jesse brings up a fantastic point about just that 5 minute phone call. I think what happens when, and I'm going to draw a little bit of my nursing experience in this, especially when it comes to terminal illnesses. In my own experience, I found that a lot of people tend to get a little bit more isolated from their friends. And it's not because their friends want to be jerks and isolate them, but more so I think it's just a level of uncomfortableness
Yes.
in understanding what is happening with their friend. And I think what people forget is that you're still friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, give them a phone call. You don't have to ask about the illness. You don't have to talk about what they're dealing with unless they want to bring it up. And if they do bring it up and you're feeling a little uncomfortable, tell them. They're your friend. You have a relationship, and so maybe you're uncomfortable and it could just be from a lack of knowledge, and they would be happy to educate you, or they would even be happy just to not talk about it. Most of all, I can assure you that that person dealing with that illness or condition at the time is enjoying nothing more than hearing the sound of your voice and hopefully a little laughter. So, yeah, I just wanted to, you brought up that point, and so I just really wanted to elaborate on that based off of my nursing experience and my personal experience as well.
Yeah. I think, friends and family of anyone who's suffering with chronic illness maybe feel like they don't know how to approach it. They are scared to ask the wrong questions, and they just don't know how to navigate it. But it is as simple as just a 5 minute chat. Hey, you okay? How are you doing? Did you see that TV show on Netflix?
Yeah, definitely.
Just normal chit chat, and it just brings a little slice of normality back to who you're talking to.
Yeah, definitely. It makes a huge difference to somebody's day, and that could really honestly be the brightest point of an individual's day as well. And so, yeah, I think it's really important. So I wanted to move on, and I mentioned before, and what you've described is that you've found a new type of success, and so I'm imagining it looked very different from the type of success that you had in mind prior to your diagnosis. Yeah, and so how would you define success for yourself now, and how has that evolved and adapted since the diagnosis?
So, as I was saying earlier, like I used to do 12-hour, 14-hour shifts in security. Life was wildly different back then, and I used to work as many hours as possible because I was in my 20s and, I could do so. It's realizing that, post illness, like I was saying, workplaces are not usually tailored towards, being friendly for people who are chronically ill or disabled or neurodivergent. And you're kind of searching for like a way through it and carving your own path through, if that makes sense. So, like, I remember thinking, I can't do this anymore, but what can I do? What ways can I work differently towards, what I feel is success? And, realizing that I had to throw everything out the window that I knew about productivity. And success to me now is being able to do what I love, being able to use the creative side of my brain. And also, I'm very lucky in the fact I can take an afternoon nap if I need to rest. And that's so important. I cannot tell
It
you
really
how
is.
important that is. And it might sound so simple, but being able to work flexible hours, I know most employers kind of frown upon, letting people choose their own hours. I don't know, it might be different in Canada, but here in the UK it's very much 9 to 5 or 12-hour shifts. But I've found I work better and I get more of my best work done when I do like a split day. So like I'll wake up in the morning, do some work while, the day is still quiet. Everyone else is still asleep. Just, get some of that work out of the way in the morning then usually between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock, I will sleep. And I don't feel guilty about it anymore, because I know that if I don't do that, I'll sit staring at my screen for hours, just staring blankly into space, and then I go down the path of beating myself up, and it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Do not waste that valuable nap time.
Right. I found with my fatigue post illness that yeah, like I have some energy in the mornings, and then usually around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, I need to lay down as well. And then I usually get up around 4:30 ish. If I don't do that by 6 o'clock, I'm having a total crash, and I will like, yeah, that'll lead me to like 14 hours in bed, which is way too long. That has its own other issues with pain involved as well if I have to stay in bed that long. So I think it's really important, and in taking that time and having that rest. But you are right. I think a lot of employers are so focused on, especially hourly employees, they're so focused on trying to find as much productivity per hour based on that pay. And I think for for people with chronic illnesses, we need to change the conversation in regards to that hourly pay and focus maybe a little bit more on performance pay in regards to finishing projects or project pay. And I think in my own experience of talking to people with chronic illnesses, I find that the people who do tend to find a little bit more success, either previous to illness worked in that kind of a model where it was, project pay. So they get paid
Yeah.
at the end of a project, or, they get a deposit and then get a final pay at the end of the project. But then it also allows them to ideally work whenever they need to.
Yeah. That's the beauty of it. There's no like, oh, you have to be at a Zoom meeting at 8 in the morning, and then you have to, you spend 4 hours in a work group, and just being left to your own devices. And also, as I was saying, being very in tune with yourself and knowing when you need to rest and when you're going to be most able to focus on what you're doing, um,
Yeah.
is vital.
I think, um, over the last couple of years, having the work from home model, I think was very beneficial for a lot of people with chronic illnesses. Maybe not so much the isolation portion of it, but like the
Yeah.
flexibilities that tended to come with it. I think that was very beneficial. And it kind of saddens me a little bit that a lot of businesses are moving back to, they want to move back to a solely in-house model as opposed to maybe having a hybrid or having that flexibility.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, since your diagnosis, are there any milestones or achievements that you are most proud of?
I think for me, it's being able to get through a work day. I know that sounds maybe silly, but being able to, have a call with a client and walk them through something I've designed. And it's just something I never thought I would be able to do. And, building up to that point has been a journey. But for me, it's the satisfaction of I've done the thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think for me going into the leatherwork, one of the nice things that I like about it is that after I've completed a piece, I have this tangible physical item that I can look at, I can touch, I can feel,
Yeah.
and it's just a level of success in my own regards.
Hmm.
Which brings me to my next question. So, how do you celebrate those wins, whether they're big or small?
I'm really lucky in the way that my partner will also celebrate my wins. He's the first to go, let's go out for a cocktail, celebrate. Yeah. It's it's kind of recognizing that you have something to celebrate, right? Is kind of like, I did the thing. It went really well. And that's not just for work things, that's for, maybe you did the dishes that were a mountain high, and that's a massive win.
Yeah,
I think you
definitely.
have to kind of move the goalposts in what you define success as sometimes. And for some people, it might be, oh, I traveled to this country for this meeting and secured this client. Well, success to me at one point was I managed to run the Hoover around the living room.
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think it's sharing with your support system, whether that be friends you have never met and are online that you've managed to do something, or you're working towards doing something. and having them cheer for you is incredible. Like, I have friends online like you know, we've not met in real life, but we met through social media, and I know we've told each other about things we've managed to do, and just having that person in your corner. And you don't need to meet someone in real life to feel that support. And you know, online you have a real opportunity to find people who have the same interests as you.
Yeah, I have to say, I've been really blessed and I have some amazing friends in real life that I really wish they lived closer to me, but they're at least within a short distance of travel. Having said that, I have a couple friends that I have met on social media or online, such as yourself, who are some of the most fantastic people that I think if these platforms didn't exist, I would never have had the opportunity to meet and share experiences with. And so, yeah, it's huge support, and it's good to have, especially in our situations where we're both dealing with some levels of chronic illness and injuries, just being able to have that conversation, which I think a lot of people don't necessarily have the opportunity to have within their close knit friend groups or family. Moving on to a really important thing to discuss, however, I think is setbacks, and inevitably they are going to arise. And so, what do you do to help keep yourself motivated and continuing to move forward?
Kind of have an inner compass. I know that sounds really weird, but have an inner compass that kind of always, it's like I have so much noise going on in my life. Sometimes you just have to listen to the inner compass and go, this is why I'm doing this. Like, your why is a huge thing. Like, you know, why did I start painting all those years ago? Because it helped me relax. Because it enabled me to take that time for myself.
Yeah, that's really important. And so, I guess, what advice would you give to somebody who's struggling to redefine success on their own terms?
I would say take what you know about success, put it in a box, stick it in a cupboard, or burn it, or I don't know, throw it somewhere, and just think about what you really really want to do, and having that drive and ambition to do something. Think about what you really enjoy doing, anything that you're passionate about, any special interests, and think about things you can do that are related to those interests. And also seek inspiration. That's such a big thing. Like, you know, we both spent hours watching YouTube, an unhealthy amount of YouTube. um, but you know, drawing inspiration from other people, and my mind's gone.
Farts happen.
I
They
know,
are real.
the brain fog is real.
Uh, Many people deal with chronic illness and feel pressured to meet the traditional meaning of success. What advice would you give to somebody who's struggling to redefine success on their own terms?
I would ask them to actually question why, you know, people you may have worked for in the past, how they define success and why they define success that way, and completely rethink, completely throw everything you knew about it out before and start over, and realize that success for you may be, you know, something really small at the moment because you feel unable to do certain things. But, you know, like I was saying before, success for me when I first was diagnosed and I was really, really ill was I managed to get dressed. I managed to have a shower. I managed to do some dishes. And I managed to do half an hour of drawing. And that was, for me, how I defined my success at the time. And just being really patient with yourself and take it a day at a time.
Yeah, I know. When I first came out of hospital too, after spending a month in the hospital, and 10 days of that intubated and knocked out, lost a lot of muscle mass, and so doing the simplest things was so much work. And I remember thinking to myself one day, my glimmer or my success for the day was I made it up one flight of stairs without stopping. I was so short of breath that I thought I was going to fall back down the stairs.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I managed to make it to the top of the stairs without taking a break in the middle and such. And so, yeah, it's that at that time that was a huge success, and I never ever would have thought about that as a success before because I used to run up 6 flights of stairs 15 times a day.
Yeah.
when I was working.
And that's the thing, just taking everything you knew about success before and how you would, I guess, define your own success and take a step back and go, hey, okay, I'm finding the dishes really daunting today. I don't even want to go in the kitchen. And then just say to yourself, I'm just going to do 3 minutes and see how I feel. And like,
Yeah.
I remember saying that to myself before. And then if I got through the first 3 minutes, I'd want to carry on because I was on a roll and I was, doing it. And then at the end, I'm just like, oh my God, I did the dishes.
Right?
Yeah.
I was really bad for causing myself to crash. And to be fair, I'm still really bad at causing my own crashes.
Hmm.
I don't like to, I'm really bad at listening to myself sometimes. I've learned things I need to do, but I don't always listen to my body quite as much as I should. And so I think it's very natural to want to feel and do the things prior to experiencing the illnesses. I find it really hard to always remember that I need to start off slow because I'll start off really fast and then I pay for it later.
It's pacing, isn't it, at the end of the day? Like, before we would have probably done all the things all at the same time and not thought twice about it. But now our bodies are very different. They're fighting various different things. And, I find if I do everything in a day, the next 2, 3 days I'm in bed because I can't, I'm in too much pain, to move. So it really is just sort of pacing yourself. And I'm the most impatient person. Like,
Right.
I just want everything done yesterday, but it is just going, I'll just do a little bit of this today. I'll just do
Yeah.
a little bit of this. And really listening to yourself. And I am actually the worst for it. Like, it gets to 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm just sitting at my desk, like, and then my partner's like, have you had a nap yet? And I'm like, no. He's like, go on.
Right.
And it does help having people who notice what's normal for you now and what's not. And, having other people pick up on maybe the fact that you need to go and get a snack. That's another thing. I'm really grumpy if I don't have a snack. I mean, that was the case before I had illness, but even more so now.
I find my filter just disappears when I've overextended myself. I find it really, really hard to adapt to external stimuli in such a way that is, appropriate. I know it can get really short with people, and after well over a decade worth of nursing, I have to say my sense of humor can be quite black at times. And when my filter goes, it goes very black. And I will say things that sound funny in my head, as in like haha funny, but they are not taken that way. And so that has been something I have to always constantly remember, that if I push myself to that point, I may tick off somebody who's close to me
Yeah, yeah.
and such. So
That's the thing, because like when you're in so much pain and you're trying to do these things and maybe something's not going quite as you thought it would be, you need a nap, you haven't eaten all day, you're not hydrated. I get a bit grouchy.
yeah.
And I don't mean to be, but having people in your life who understand that is incredible.
Yeah, so you've brought up some really great points, giving yourself a permission structure to pace yourself and to rest, finding those glimmers of hope everywhere, whether it be, the coffee first thing in the morning, a phone call from a friend, and most importantly, learning how to redefine what success means to you as an individual. We don't have to take society's definition, and I would encourage people not to take society's definition of what success is, especially after a diagnosis or an injury. So, as we wrap up, I just wonder if you have one message or piece of advice that you would like to share with our listeners who are navigating chronic illnesses.
To reach out for support online, I would say find other people who are going through a similar thing to you. I mean, everyone's very, very different. Conditions affect people very differently. So I would say find your community online because we're very lucky that we have the internet now. Like when my parents were younger, they didn't have the internet, and my mum had a chronic health condition, and she went to a library and found a book about her condition. And she did not have the online support that we do today. So do your research as well about your condition because a doctor will hand you a leaflet about it, but I'm not saying that's wrong or right or whatever, but I would say do your own research about how you can ease your symptoms as well. And it's trial and error. Like, give yourself some patience to sink into your new normal, and yeah, try pacing yourself, allowing yourself time to take time for yourself. Everyone has a very busy life, but chronic illness forces us to slow down. And even when we slow down, it's so important to just, immerse yourself in something that you enjoy for half an hour, because I guarantee it will help you feel a little bit more yourself.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about learning about your condition or your illness. It's really important, and I really encourage anybody who has gotten a new diagnosis, don't be in a rush, but do take the time to become the expert. As a healthcare professional, it always amazed me how many times I came across patients who were more the expert in their condition than the physician that they were working with. And, not only did they know more about their condition, but they were caught up on all of the top research and everything that was happening in the field of their chronic illness. And it just amazed me at, how insightful some people can be and how much work they put into it. Yeah, don't be afraid to become the expert. Um, so what's next for you, Jessie? Are you working on any new projects, or do you have any passions or goals that you're currently pursuing that you would like to share with us?
Yes. So as I say, I'm a designer and strategist for a freelance agency. We are hoping to get some more projects around like being eco-friendly and working with non-profits, because we're very keen to contribute to good things in the world when everything seems so dark at the moment. And also, we're in the process of launching a charity, which is essentially going to help neurodivergent people with their mental health. And that's a very big passion of mine. As I say, I've had ADHD since I was a child, but only diagnosed in 2022. Felt like everything was stuck on hard mode. There's a lot of support out there for people with, mental health, or there's, support out there for neurodivergence, but the two never seem to meet.
Yeah.
And having that, resource of information and support out there is something I cannot wait to have in place.
That's phenomenal. And if it's okay with you, I will ask for the information and we can post it into the description. So for anybody out there who is interested in this project or think they may be able to contribute or want to get involved, they can find ways to reach out to your organization and help support you guys.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I just want to thank you so much for the time that you've afforded me today and joining me for this conversation. And so thank you for joining Chronic Life Success.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved talking with you about my journey, and I hope to inspire other people as well.
Thank you. And that's what we're trying to do is create a community here and allow for additional information that there seems to be a significant void in. So I really do appreciate all of the information that you've provided to the listeners and such. And so I'm sure you and I will have the opportunity to talk again soon. Maybe in the future, if we can keep this podcast going and such. At some point, I'd like to be able to have a couple of my guests maybe come on for at the same time and have a really good discussion. So I'm gonna put that bug in your ear should we get to that point, and I may be reaching out to see if you'd be interested in something along those lines.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jessie.
Thank you.
I would like to thank you very much for joining us on Chronic Life Success tonight. As you have heard, Jessie's story is just one of many out there of people who are finding success despite their chronic illnesses and injuries. And thank you so much for taking the time to enjoy this show. I hope that we have earned your like, subscribe, and your follow so that way we can continue to bring these kind of riveting stories to light. I have been your host, Adam Wilson, and I'm wishing you success in the future.